Hello friends, I'm Ben Kacharis here, one of the contributing editors with the Christian Standard magazine, and I'm here on the floor of the North American Christian Convention in Anaheim with our good friend Dr. Jerry Taylor from Abilene Christian University in Texas, who has been such a champion for bringing the church together across lines of color and class and creed, and we're so grateful for the work that you have done and are doing and calling all of us to do, really, Jerry. So appreciative. There's so much to be discouraged about these days with this. This week we have more sad news to wring our hands about and be concerned about legitimately. And yet, there are some positive things to be encouraged about. What do you see that is good news in this realm of moving the church more toward the vision of heaven?
Well, some have defined crisis as an opportunity. Crisis meaning turning point, that we are approaching a curve and we can either keep going forward into the curve or we can negotiate the turn and turn with the curve. And so I think people who have been baptizing their hearts in prayer way before this hour of our history arrived, have been allowing God to prepare them for such a time as this. There have been relationships that have been started 10 years ago. 2006 was my first appearance at the North American Christian Convention, and as a result of that, we've been able to enjoy the warmth of relationships across even the lines of our quote-unquote separate fellowships with both blacks and whites and Hispanics. So I think the work that has been done since that time created among us an invisible bond that when atrocities like what we saw happen, we can think of those people in our lives, white people, African Americans, and that's what keeps us hopeful, that we don't judge an entire group based upon the actions of one or two individuals, because we have credible proof that there are individuals in all groups that love, that know how to show warmth, that know how to show hospitality and invite us into their lives. And so the work that has been done by a number of people leading up to this moment, I think has equipped us to be able to absorb the blunt of this blow and remain committed to moving beyond that and upping the ante, so to speak, to be more aggressive in reaching out and communicating our love for one another.
It's really interesting, isn't it, how this massive issue does boil down in certain ways to the importance of human, Christ-centered friendship.
Absolutely.
That it does start with a hand and a hand and a friendship and so forth.
Right.
Yes. So one of the complicating factors seems to be that whenever we begin to discuss issues of racial diversity and harmony and division, the polarity and the shouting and the political infusion and complexity of this, it just gets so clouded, and people are like, well, they ramming this diversity training down my throat at work. And you made a statement this morning at our Dream of Destiny breakfast about political correctness and how there have been a number of governmental and external efforts at desegregation and so forth, attempting to sort of bridge this gap. But here was your quote. Political correctness at the end of the day, you said something like this, makes it possible for blacks and whites and those across all kinds of divides to occupy the same space physically, but still remain 1 trillion miles apart emotionally, spiritually. Unpack that a little bit for us. What's the failing that you were trying to point out, and what's the vision you're leading us to?
Okay. Political correctness can produce an external social conformity. In other words, we can honor people with our lips, but our hearts remain far from each other, as Jesus stated in his case. I believe political correctness turns us into good politicians, but cannot turn us into genuine friends. Political correctness says that I will say what others want me to say, even if I don't mean it. I will espouse views that I know are socially acceptable, even if I don't hold those views to be true for myself. And so political correctness forces people to be dishonest. It forces people to engage in hypocrisy, to say something that is totally contrary to who they are. And I think we as a society, we as a church, we need to create a safe space for people to share what they truly believe, whether that's good, bad, ugly, positive, negative. We have to create a space where people can come out of the hiding and say, this is who I am, this is what I feel, this is what I think. It could be totally wrong, but this is what I'm feeling. So if I'm out in left field, nobody will know that I'm out in left field until I find the safe space to come out and say, this is where I am. And then to have those who would engage not in political correctness, but will engage in loving correction in a humble way, a teaching way, without coming across as being self-righteous. But we can't grow with one another if we're hiding our true selves from one another.
Yes.
So
again, you're pointing us to real people and individual relationships.
yes,
Getting around people that don't look like them.
yes,
And hearing each other's stories,
Yes.
and being honest about enough to say some of the ugly that I think and feel. You also have helped so many people see that there is going to be a tough side to this. We can be
yes.
polite to a point,
Yeah.
shake hands on stage,
yes,
but if we're going to move the ball truly forward in a way that
Yeah.
fulfills the vision
yes.
of the Spirit of Christ moving in our midst, making us one, John 17, it's going to have to get through some ugly.
Exactly.
And that doesn't happen without relationships. Do you have suggestions for a local church that's listening to this, a minister saying, I want to help my church do this? Are there practical ways that you can suggest for facilitating what you're talking about?
Well, I think the beautiful thing about it, in the church, we have been given the spiritual resources and the tools that we need to go deeper into each other's lives. As I talked about it this morning, the contemplative prayer, the lifestyle of contemplative prayer. We've been given those tools to take us deeper into ourselves and deeper into the life of God. And when each person is going to that deep place and going deeper into God, then we will hear deep crying unto deep. The depth of God in your life will be crying out to the depth of God in my life. And that's when the real reconciliation begins to happen.
Okay.
That I can no longer hold anger and hatred and bitterness in my heart towards my brother,
Yes.
because there is holy ground that exists between us, and that we have both arrived at that sacred space and sacred place in God, where we all stand guilty, where we all have to admit that we have done things or said things to hurt other human beings. And we stand in His presence crying, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner. And so if I know the imperfections in my own life and the shortcomings of all human beings, then I have to be willing to ask myself to forgive others as I have asked God to forgive me.
That's right.
And so the practical thing would be for a black person and a white person to carve out some time, maybe 5 or 6 hours on one Saturday, and they devote 2 of those hours just sitting together in silence, listening to the voice of God, because we can't really learn how to listen to each other as human beings if we don't learn how to sit still and listen to the voice of God. If I can honor and reverence God enough to be still and to allow Him to speak to me in the very private place of my being, then it trains me to be able to sit still and listen to the words that will come from my brother or my
Yes.
sister.
What I just love that so much, because it seems like people are talking past each other.
Yes.
And we sort of have seen some people suggest that we need to get past that and learn to listen to each other, which
Yeah.
is so true.
Yes, yeah.
Where you're saying, let's go further. Let's
Yes,
listen
yes.
to the Spirit of God
Right.
in our midst
Exactly,
first.
exactly.
So we can hear each other through
Yeah.
that lens.
Right.
Now we've got something.
That's
That's a
right.
beautiful
Right.
statement.
Yeah.
You talk sometimes about information. I'm concerned. I stand up to talk about this at our church, at Mountain Christian Church out in Maryland, and I know I'm talking to people that have way too much of their ear formed by CNN, CNBC, Fox News, whatever.
Right.
And what do you mean when you say be careful about this information idea?
Yeah, okay. Well, there is an outer world that we can see with our physical eyes, and we can maneuver around it with our physical senses. But there's also a spiritual world, and the only way that we can maneuver around in that world is through a sixth sense, which is the sense of the Spirit, which also, I think, is God's way of infusing His wisdom into our lives. And that is what I would call holy, heavenly information, as opposed to the secular, worldly information that James describes as worldly wisdom. And James says that that wisdom that is worldly is sensual, it is devilish, it is full of envy, it is full of jealousy. It is a wisdom of this world that encourages us to be at each other's throats, to fight and to compete over the things of this world, which James says that's what caused these fights and these killings, is because we're striving for things. Somebody got something that I want, I got something that I feel other people want, and we get into a tug of war over things that are not even going to survive. That's the worldly wisdom, and we're getting filled with that every single day, both consciously and unconsciously. We're being filled with that kind of worldly wisdom. We turn on the news, their ratings don't go up until they can give us a good fight, somebody fighting. Somebody said this about that person and vice versa. But the wisdom that comes from God, that forms our mentality of peace, James says that that wisdom is gentle, it is humble, it is kind, it is approachable, it is sincere, has nothing to do with political correctness. It comes from a genuine heart, a place of sincerity. And that's the kind of information that we want to form us within our mind, our spirit, our heart, our soul, so that our minds can truly be renewed and transformed, and no longer held in captivity to the pattern of this world.
And that is the beautiful vision that we
Yes.
hold out, that
Yeah.
there is a people of God
Yes.
that
Yes.
we will celebrate and be part of so beautifully without some of the barriers we
Yes,
have today.
absolutely.
That
absolutely.
vision transplanting itself today
Right,
is what excites me. I appreciate
Right.
brothers like you and so many others that have continually called us to live under the banner of that vision
Oh, right.
today,
Wonderful.
on earth as it is in heaven.
Absolutely.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Jerry Taylor,
All
if you
right.
haven't already listened and gone to the website, you want to hear his talk at Dream of Destiny today, 2016 North American. Thank
All
you.
right.
God
Thank
bless.
you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.